Hello everyone. Welcome to today's webinar hosted by CauseVox on branding brilliance, mastering the art of a custom donation page. My name is Jenna Notar-Francesco. I'm account executive at CauseVox, and you're also joined by Rob Wu, our CEO and co-founder. And we are super excited to have you here today. We're going to get started in just a few minutes, but first I want to welcome everyone here and let you know that the webinar is being recorded. So that'll be sent out along with our slide PDFs in the next couple days. And then, if you have any questions throughout today's webinar, feel free to use the Q&A panel, chat us in, however you can get to us. We're going to try to answer your questions as soon as possible. But I just want to welcome everyone again and ask you to feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. We'd love to know who's joining us. And today's big question of the day is, who is joining us from the farthest time zone? So if you're with us, chat us in your name, where you're from, your time zone, and let's see where everyone's located. And also, in one word, how would you describe the state of fundraising this year? This is a critical question. I don't know about you, but it's been a pretty crazy time for fundraising. So Rob Hayes in Austin, Texas. All right, we've got CST time. I'm in Eastern time zone. I'm in New York. So let's see where everybody's from. Stephen in Minneapolis, Central time zone. Rough. I don't know, Rob. What are we going to do about this term for fundraising that is rough? Well, hopefully we will help you guys make it less rough. And we're going to do that by getting our branding on brand. I don't know. We're going to do something amazing with branding today. So get ready. And let me just kick off a little bit about what CauseVox is all about if you're new to us. Basically, CauseVox is a digital fundraising platform to help organizations modernize their fundraising. So we get you up and running with best-in-class donation pages like the ones we're going to discuss today. They include all of your mobile wallets. You can run campaign sites and integrate your ticketing and peer-to-peer simultaneously. We give you a great support team here. So we'll answer all your questions as quickly as possible with real life people. And we also offer top-rated fundraising education in the form of guides, templates, and webinars like this one today. So again, we modernize your fundraising in the sense that, where traditional software might be clunky and it just is behind today's donor preferences, we actually embrace your donors' preferences, and we do that by giving incredibly branded donation pages, which is what we're focusing on today. And just fully customizable campaign sites, as well as automated recurring and pledge donations, event ticket forms, and easy peer-to-peer fundraising. So it's all your fundraising all in one place, makes it super simple. If you are looking for a really great donation form on your website, or you need peer-to-peer ticketing, etc., you want to get those donations in, you can check out our schedule a demo page. There's a pre-recorded demo there for your convenience, or you can even book one with me. And we can talk one-on-one more specifically about how the CauseVox donation page would be a great fit and how you could use it strategically for your own organization. So great. I look forward to chatting with you soon. For today, right now, what we're talking about again is branding for your donation page. So we talked a little bit about our introductions. Next, we're going to talk about why branding matters, as well as our brand beacon framework, which you'll want to take note. And then we'll have some time at the end for Q&A. Now, the way that we're structuring today's webinar is a little different. I am going to be sort of like a host interviewing Rob. So I'm going to be picking his brain, and he will be delivering beautiful bite-sized nuggets of wisdom for all of you in the house. So you'll want to keep an ear out. But again, we're going to record all this, so it's going to be all in your hands soon. So great. Again, if you have questions throughout, I'm going to be asking my own questions. If you want to ask your questions on a specific section, feel free to chat them into the Q&A, and I can try to bring them to Rob in the moment there. Cool. All right. So yes, ask us anything. We're ready. All right. So without further ado, Rob, so we're talking about branding a donation page specifically. Can you tell us why branding matters for nonprofits?
Yes. Well, before I answer that question, I think you set a really high bar of beautiful bite-sized nuggets of info. So I'll try my best. And again, for the audience, all the slides I prepared today will be sent over to y'all, as well as the recording too. But kind of to your question, Jenna, why does branding matter? Okay, I think a bunch of you folks are here today because you probably think that branding does matter. And I think that's true. So one of the things I set out to discover a few months ago is to figure out how have donors preferences really shifted in the past few months, and why is fundraising so rough for folks? As I think, as Steve mentioned, fundraising is rough. So why is that? So one of the insights I found is, which is just common sense, is that relationships matter when it comes to fundraising. 70% of donors are more likely to donate when there's a personal connection. But something that was really interesting in the data when I looked at it was that 75% of donors were more likely to donate through a branded donation page. So what this tells you, that donors value not only the relationship with the organization, but also they really value to a higher degree how branded the donation page is, how branded the experience is for them to make a donation. It helps build trust, and also gives a lens of sense of commitment to impact and storytelling. We also found that for what's interesting is for high earners, for folks who basically make over $100,000 a year in income, 81% of them wanted a streamlined donation experience. So this is all the way from the first touch of how the organization makes the donor feel, all the way through making a transaction, having a really seamless experience, really branded experience for donors. And then when I slice the data even more, just to kind of really hammer in that not only branding is important for donors, but also it's important for donor retention. So for donors who prioritize a branded donation experience, so these are folks who say, hey, I am more likely to donate to a great professionally designed branded donation page. They basically also tell us that they're more likely to continue the donation for 5+ more years. So your best donors are going to come from the folks who value brand, and your best performance as an organization, and when fundraising is rough, is when you double down on the efforts to provide a great branded and seamless donation experience for your donors. So I thought that was super duper interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's very clear based on the numbers here that branding does matter based on donor response. So if branding is so important, how should nonprofits navigate this approach to branding and customize their donation page well?
Great question. So we have a framework over here at CauseWalks, since we fundamentally believe that branding and storytelling will yield more donations and impact for fundraisers and their organizations. So we have this thing called the Brand Beacon Framework. Essentially, it's a 6-step process for any organization, big or small, to really look at their donation pages as well as the donor experience and figure out how they can make it a more seamless experience for donors, and how you can integrate customization and branding and best practices into your donation experience, such as your donation form or page. So 6 steps. It starts with assess up top. This is kind of a wheel over here that keeps on going and going and going. So it helps you iterate on it. So you first start with assess, then you design, then you focus on storytelling, then the UX, the user interface for donors. You look at mobile responsiveness, and then you test and iterate in order to customize your donation page. So a very easy 6-step framework, step by step. And I do want to dive into this today, right, Jenna?
Yeah. So let's take a look at our number 1 step, which is assess. Tell us about the first step and why this is critical to begin here in the branding process.
Yeah. So fundamentally, thinking about when you think about branding, it really revolves around the foundational aspects of your organization. So at the core of it really is making sure that you have a solid foundation to build on top of. I think what a lot of times where fundraisers where we get caught is that our organizations just have a whole ton of programs creating tons of impact, and our stakeholders like our board members or our big funders want us to head into a certain direction. So we go on certain tangents, we start fighting certain fires. So I think the core of it is really understanding who we are as an organization and what we stand for. So what this looks like is understanding your core values, like what's your personality? What do you stand for? Who do you want to be known for as an organization? Then looking at our mission, like what is our statement of impact? Not just our mission statement, but also just how we really describe it and explain it to somebody who's 5 years old, like really distilling it down to the core idea of the mission. And also looking at who our intended target audience is, like who are the folks we actually want to reach and who do we want to convert as donors, as well as who do we want to steward. So understanding those three components is super important. And if I want to dive down into kind of the target audience, I actually think this is the most important piece of branding, knowing who we want to talk to and who they are, what makes them tick. So there's three different things that you can take a look at. Basically, the first one is demographics. So this is kind of the easy part. Are they Gen Z? Are they Gen Y? Like, what is their age? Where do they live? Do they live in a wealthy zip code or not? Or are they kind of college kids? That kind of thing. So understanding the basic demographics of your donor base, and this can be easily done just by taking a look at your CRM and then just pulling and aggregating some data. So that's a very simple, rudimentary way to go about it. Or you can just talk to a sample of a few donors. Take your top 20, top 50 donors. Ideally, you get to about 120 people when you do a survey, but just understanding from an anecdotal perspective, like who are our folks on my list that are donors, and understanding what makes them tick. The other piece of it is looking at psychographics, like what are the motivations? Since donors are motivated by certain programs, they may want to support certain things. They may not be as interested in certain projects that you have. Really aligning their interests and what makes them tick to how you message and how you present your brand to them is important. The very last of it, looking at some of your donor history. Who are your repeat donors? What have they given to, and what is the frequency? So just kind of at the meat of, again, just looking at the core, looking at the foundational aspects. First, understanding your target audience, then aligning that with your mission as well as your core values.
Makes sense. Although, yeah, it can be sort of difficult to sort of sit down sometimes and like think about all these things, but I guess it's pretty necessary first step to know where the information is going to land properly, right? So what is your biggest tip to organizations looking to balance this brand promotion and donor engagement to make it a very effective donation page?
Yeah, like there's certain donation pages have certain purposes. And I think one of the things that a lot of organizations do is because it's difficult for them to wrangle with the IT side of spinning up donation forms, as well as what's difficult is just kind of setting up integrations of data, just a lot of other obstacles in place, is that when folks want to have different goals for their donation pages, it's actually extremely difficult. So there's a lot of hoops they have to jump through. But one of the things I challenge our audience just to really think about is that your donation page can have different purposes for different audiences. So for example, if you have a pool of strong, loyal, retained donors, then why just direct them to a generic donation form that has a certain donation amount set at, let's say, $50 or $75? When you have strong retention as well as high gift sizes, then what you do want to do is set a goal, say, hey, for these segment of donors, I actually want to upgrade them to a recurring donation or to a pledge donation. So when we're thinking about the goals of donation form, it's really understanding your target audience and who are these folks, what makes them tick, as well as where do I want them to go in terms of the next step. So kind of taking it along with the answer is like, one, in terms of your brand, understand the segment of folks that you want to target for a specific brand message. And then second, also figure out what is the goal of your fundraising. Is it to just acquire a donor so you can nurture them throughout the year? So maybe we set the recommended gift amount to something pretty low. Or is it to upgrade them so that we can get them on a recurring giving or pledge giving profile? So
Yeah,
to kind of
sounds
think through
good.
some of those aspects.
Yeah, it's kind of like people want to be told what to do sometimes, I guess, in this realm of of work and donations and such. So being clear in the messaging is always important. That's awesome. That's great. For those of you still tracking with us, if you have any questions about that first section, the assess step, feel free to chat us in. And yeah, we're going to keep going in this cycle. The next step is design. So tell us, Rob, what are some key aspects when considering logo placement?
Yeah, I think that for when folks think about branding, they actually think about design the most, since that's what's the, I guess, probably the fun part of branding, where you can actually pick up, you actually become an artist. You can figure out, okay, what does my logo look like? What are the colors? What's the typography? This is kind of the fun stuff. So, but kind of what backs into it is like kind of the foundational pieces, like what's our personality as a brand? What is the message? Kind of that's kind of the nitty gritty harder stuff to do. So, and that's what you get from this assess stage. So if you have the right outputs from the assess stage, then going into design is actually pretty easy. Then you know, okay, we want to be a fun brand, or we want to be a serious brand, or you want to then, or you have the insight to say, okay, well, our demographic is younger, so we need to be a little bit more playful, or our demographic for donors is more professional, so we need to be a little bit more buttoned up, for example. So once you have the outputs from the assess side of this section over here from what we just talked about, then you can take those insights and easily populate what's in the design. So I think there's a few pieces to it. I think the first piece would be just understanding your logo. So every organization has a logo for the most part, or some type of typography related to it. So a few tips related to this is that you want your logo to be consistent across all the assets that you have. So on social media, all the way to your print material, all the way to your campaign sites. You want to reinforce the reminder. So having that mark, the mark is the little icon or the little picture that's on your logo. To have that just dispersed around your not only your website but your campaign site, so folks know who you are. And then you want to be consistent with not only the colors but the design as well as the sizing of your logo too. And then lastly, just understanding how to use like different coloring too. And one of the tips I have is that especially when we see a lot of folks use logos on campaign sites on Coswalks, is that just one simple tip: just use a transparent background PNG logo so it blends in better with the design of your campaign site or donation page. So for example, on the upper right hand side over here, this is just like a JPEG where there's like a white background on dark, and it's kind of a little jarring. It looks very unprofessional because it's not blended in with the background. So in order to fix this, it's a very easy tweak. You just use a transparent PNG where the background is transparent, so it doesn't interrupt the look and feel of it. So that's the second from the top option on the right hand side over here. So when you're creating your donation pages and campaign sites, I would say just kind of look at that to use that as an option. There are other stuff too. So for example, let me go to my other screen over here. In terms of logo placement, for example, typically, if you want to kind of create a really stunning design related to your donation page, it's best to have some type of logo on the top or to the left. I think that's typically how people read from top to bottom, left to right. So having some type of logo that's easily recognizable. For example, here we have Res Refuge on top over here, the logo and branding. They have a little more info related to kind of what they do, a little story, their donation form. And then if I scroll down to the bottom on the footer, then you see again their logo for reinforcement. So it's best to place kind of your mark, or at least kind of the name of your organization throughout your donation page and campaign site, so it reinforces trust when a donor is making a donation. So thereby it makes the donation experience a little bit more seamless.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Making sure that the logo is, very clear, obvious, and like an easy to read location, right up front for the donor to see, to establish the brand recognition. So in terms of design, we've discussed the logo and the importance of the logo, the logo placement. Next, we can consider maybe the color scheme, right? And so when thinking about the whole color scheme of the entire page, do you think that I guess where should the organization start with coloring their page, and do they use their logo colors? Yeah, how should an organization navigate the color scheme of the page?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that the logo typically is provided already, where as an organization, you probably have a logo already. That's one of the first things that it was either handed to you as a fundraiser, or if you're in a smaller shop, maybe that's or startup, you kind of design that from the very first steps as you created a name of the organization. But the colors is a little bit different, where sometimes organizations have a branding guide where their marketing team or someone has created like a document saying, okay, these are the colors that we need to use. This is the logo placement. This is the typography. If you have all of that over there, then that's great. As an organization, you just have to follow the rules. But if you don't have that, then you can probably be a little bit more creative. But again, the creativity aspect of it is fun, but you kind of have to stay within the bounds of your brand. So understanding the core foundations, the values, the mission, like the personality of it. But if you have more freedom when it comes to color of how you use it, if you don't have a strict brand guideline, or if you don't have something already created, then one of the things you can do is determine like what are your brand colors. So the brand colors have to match the personality as well as the message of your brand. So for example, if you use colors that are a little bit more blue, that typically lends itself to be recognized as a little bit more professional. If your brand colors are a little bit more purple, then it lends itself to a feel of a little bit more royal or kind of luxury kind of focus. Or if your brand colors are more poppy, like they're like hot pink or like bright yellow, then provides a little bit more fun kind of feel to it. So brand colors are super important to instill a certain feeling, since colors help us really understand that. This is just an example here that I provided. So this is just a color palette where there's 5 different colors. Each has a different color. It's kind of like going to Home Depot and then trying to figure out what colors you want to paint on your walls is a little bit overwhelming. So kind of focused on just a collection here, complementary. And this palette was interesting is that because of the colors of how some of it's muted, some of it's pretty soft, some of it's a lot of reds, it gives a more romantic or sophisticated vibe. And if that's something that's reflective of your brand, then that's great. And this is just a description here where it's reminiscent of a sunset, varying shades, kind of like a blooming garden, like a flower botanical garden. So it's really suitable for brands or organizations that are trying to mix together warmth with depth with sophistication, for example. So colors actually matter a lot because they actually tell the audience and the viewer what to feel when they're looking at your donation page. And this is a contrasting example. So, sophisticated and warm. And now we have kind of a different color palette. It's a little bit more poppy, for example. So this color palette strikes a balance between like calmness, which is kind of from the greens, like nature, leaves, grass, that kind of thing, and then energy and passion on the right-hand side. So which is reflective of, let's say, the sunlight, red and oranges, for example. So essentially this color palette works really well for designs that want to showcase like more stability, more energy, focus on growth, for example. I kind of like this color palette a lot because it has really muted colors on the left-hand side, but then on the right-hand side, you have some really bright colors that really attract the eye. So typically speaking, with the orange and red, you'll see this in buttons, for example, like a donate button or like a call to action button to sign up for a volunteer opportunity, that kind of stuff. So you can imagine this on a donation page as your donate button, then it will really stand out. So donors find it easily to find. Or if you see this on like your website on a top nav, then the donors can easily find, okay, where should I click next in order to take action?
Mhm.
So resources here that would be interesting to share is if you don't have a, bear with me a second. If you don't have kind of a color palette in mind, I do have a few other ones that could be interesting if I could find the right one. I have a ton of windows open.
Yeah, I can paste them in the chat for us here.
Yeah, why don't you just paste them in the chat since I'm having a hard time finding the windows.
Sure. Yeah, in the meantime, Kira has a great question as well. So Rob, for you, Kira says that they're an environmental agency, nonprofit, I should say, whose logo is blue and green, and most of their photos that they share are landscapes with blue and green. They don't have a brand guide. So the question is it acceptable to use their logo in white on certain photos?
Yes, for sure. So I think what's interesting about a lot of landscape photos is that you'll have a lot of darker shades of green as well as darker shades of brown. And if you're doing night photography for that, then you have a lot of black and gray as well. So what works really well is some type of white logo on a transparent background. So for example, I know this is not the best one to showcase here, but for the Cosmox logo, for the bottom one on the right, so that's actually a reverse. We call it a negative logo where there's actually no color. The logo is just white as well as gray if you have any depth to your logo. So this works really well when the photo is dark, so the logo will pop out without being intrusive. It also works really well when you have a navigation that's dark as well, because typically speaking, dark background of a navigation or a picture, for example, with some type of color logo, it tends to be a little bit jarring since there's too much contrast. So you want something that blends in really well, that's pleasing to the eye. So something with like white on dark typically works pretty well in that instance.
Yeah, that contrast is helpful. Thank you for that question. That was great. Yeah, so I pasted in the links that Rob found for you all, the colorhunt.co and Coolers. I actually haven't checked them out myself, but this looks
Check them
really
out.
awesome.
Yeah, my first job in life was a graphic designer, but you didn't know that, Jenna.
I
So
did not.
my parents, my mother actually sat me in front of a computer, was like, "You are going to design calendars," because that's what my mother sold. So I didn't get middle school. Yeah, I was just on a computer designing stuff. So I think one of the interesting things is that a lot of technology has changed, obviously. So there's two free sites that I found over here that really will help you accelerate your kind of design. One is Coolers. It's basically a color palette tool. It's free. You just go on there. You can kind of browse different color palettes until you find something that feels right to your organization. And the other one is Color Hunt. It basically does the same thing. They're free tools. They help you find colors that complement each other instead of you having to look at a color swatch and trying to figure out, okay, what are the 3 or 5 colors I want?
Does it give like the exact hex color for
It
each?
does give the exact hex color. So what's great about that is, for example, on Cosmox at least, if you want to change the colors of your donation page or nav or anything like that, then you can just copy and paste the hex color from something like Coolers or Color Hunt directly into Cosmox, and then that'll change your colors, whether it's your button or your background. I would say, typically speaking, other tools that if they allow for customization, then there will be also a hex color code that you can punch into.
Nice. So I don't have to go around the color wheel and kind of try to match it myself. Amazing.
Yeah, I think that's the hard part. If you have to like eyeball match it, sometimes it'll be like slightly off, and then like you'll see different shades, and then
Yeah.
that just makes your donation page look a little bit unprofessional.
Yeah. Yeah. So going with an easy number to go with. Yeah. We got to stick to that. All right. Yeah, no, that's really awesome. Thank you for sharing those with us. Yeah, again, if anyone has any follow-up questions on this idea of color scheme, palettes, how to implement it for your organization, feel free to chat us in or use the Q&A panel. So moving along our design section, next let's talk about typography. Now that seems to be always kind of interesting to me. There's so many options for font and etc. for your typography. Can you share how an organization would determine the font or fonts to use on their donation page?
Yeah, if there is a brand guideline created already, then just follow that. If not, then you have a lot of creative freedom. So I like it when there's creative freedom, then you can have something with a little more personality. So typography essentially just has to be readable and has to be reflective of your brand personality. But then how do you figure out, okay, what is reflective of that? So what I want to do next is kind of just dive a little deeper into just kind of the basics of typography. I'm not going to go all into it. But basically, here's 4 different like fonts, and I just want to illustrate this because each font, if you look at it individually, you may not get a sense of how it is really different than other fonts. But each font actually has a different feel. Like each type has a different feel to it. You know, for example, on the upper left-hand side, the font caveat, I don't know how to pronounce it, but basically it's a little more casual. And it's a little bit more handwritten, so it gives a feel where okay, this organization might be a little bit more grassroots. They might be a little bit more personal. They might not be like a big corporation, for example. So it kind of gives us like this smaller feel to the organization. On the upper right-hand side, what you see is that, for example, if you look at the T, there's little feet that they go on the bottom horizontally, and the little hands that go on the T. So we call those serifs. So typically, if you have serif fonts, then they typically use when something needs to be a little more professional. This originated when people were still using a typewriter. And then the idea was that, okay, if we put these little feet on the letters, then it'll help people read it, kind of what's typed out. So it kind of gives a different feel to it. If you go one down, the Literata, that one is a very clean serif font where it's not as casual just because it features sharper edges and sharper feet as well. So it kind of gives this feel where it's almost like New York Times, where it's like, okay, we're professionals over here. We've been around for a while. You should trust us. While the one above that is a serif font, but then it's a little more rounded. So it kind of gives this feel where, okay, maybe we're a little bit more of a relaxed or casual organization. And then on the bottom left over here, you have something a little bit more modern. So you don't see the feet, you don't see the serifs. We call this a sans serif font. So sans as in without the serifs. So it kind of gives you a feel of, okay, we're more a contemporary organization. We're more modern, for example. So it gives you a total different view and brand personality just through typography.
Yeah. No, this is great. I actually never really considered, what the font implies in terms of like the brand, meaning, oh, this is more free and casual. This is more, buttoned up and professional, but it makes a lot of sense. And I think this is important when we consider our branding. So yeah, hopefully this is really helpful for everyone on the call. I think you had this fonts, Google Fonts link here. I can paste it in the chat for us as a resource.
Yeah, so if folks are using or looking for ideas on fonts, a free one to use, just like the other 2 kind of color palettes, finally found my windows, is just Google Fonts. So if you just go to Google Fonts, fonts.google.com, and Jenna, I know you pasted it in, you can kind of see like the different fonts populate. So you just punch in some text like the name of your organization or the name of your campaign. And then on the right-hand side over here, you see how it looks with different fonts in different typographies. And then what you can do too is you can use the decorative strokes, for example, serifs, or all the fonts would just be like with the feet. And then, for example, sans serif, then you'll take it out. So you kind of browse over here until you get a feel of, okay, this is representative of my campaign or my organization or the feel of my appeal. And then that will give you the ability to actually download these fonts and use them in your marketing.
Yeah, there are so many fonts out there. So it could be just like going down a rabbit hole, but I think like this is a really great tool to be able to compare things side by side. And yeah, this is great. Yeah, I would go further into fonts because it really is fascinating, but we do have a lot of other material to cover. So if you have any follow-up questions with fonts, you can feel free to Q&A us or email us later. So in the design section, we have another topic regarding images and multimedia. So regarding graphics, should there be graphics or media on a donation page? And if so, what are the best types of images?
Yeah, the first part to start is figuring out, how do you want to lay out for example, your donation page? And then figuring out, okay, does it help me accomplish the goal of whatever it is for my donation page? Typically, the goal of the donation page is to get a donor to donate, right? Get that donor conversion. So if I assume that's the goal, then the question is, okay, will this image help the donor feel something, and or will it distract them? So answering in that, what really helps when it comes to donation pages as a best practice is when a donor lands on your donation page, like are they landing on it from your website, or are they being directly linked to that specific donation page? For example, maybe you want to include a direct link in your email appeal. If so, then you probably already have a story in your email, and then folks are just clicking on like a link or a button in the email in order to make a transaction. If that's the case, then having images and stories, a lot of that stuff is probably a distraction where it will reduce the conversion rate of donors just because they're reading through a lot of stuff that's repetitive or not really necessary. Now, on the other hand, if you're thinking about your Giving Tuesday appeal, for example, or something on your organization's website, then you might want to put in more images, more stories, more compelling social proof in order to get someone to make a donation. So for example, if I were to show you, I need the one that we were pulling up earlier. This is just an example here where there is an image. So this is a donation page, but on top over here, we have a quote from a student that this organization has helped with an image. So this lends itself to be providing like a social proof aspect to it where, okay, the donor knows that has a little statement, little glimpse of the impact that they can create by making a donation. So this will actually support the donation process, which should be included in the donation page. So I think images and multimedia is really up to the organization in terms of how they want to do it. But typically, if you're doing something where you want to display impact, then having more emotive imagery helps versus less.
Mm-hmm. Sort of just any visuals that can really just bring the description to life, maybe. So something that's complementary, but not something that distracts, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to be creating positive emotions through imagery. So positive emotions meaning that it not only it helps the donor feel something positive as like, okay, I can help like the folks, or I can create impact, or I can relate to these folks that I'm seeing, or it's something where it builds trust and transparency. So bringing us back to specific data through a causal activity study that we ran a few months ago, trust and transparency is probably, I forget, the number 2 tactic to help a organization convert donors to making a donation. So the more you're able to bring trust and transparency into your page, the better. And what that really is kind of quotes from donors, reviews, for example, great statements about how the organization is using funds, that kind of stuff. That kind of stuff will really help a donor on that donation page itself go through the next steps because it increases the amount of trust that you can convey through your donation page.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds good. What if what if an organization is starting out and they don't have a whole lot of photos or like visual evidence of the work that they're planning to do or have done? Like where can they find some great imagery to use?
Yeah, one way to do it, and I wouldn't highly recommend just going with this as a long-term solution, but if you're like a scrappy nonprofit startup where you maybe have some images, but they may not be the highest quality, using something authentic is typically better. So something real where you can bring more, you can basically do these 2 things. You can take the image and you can edit it, you can post-process it in something like Adobe Lightroom or Canva to make it a little bit higher quality. Or second, if the image quality is not there, you can just drop a filter on it really, and then that'll cover up a lot of the mistakes. So this in a past life too, Jenna, did you know I was a photographer? So you basically do these 2 things where you can just use more authentic imagery, even if it's not like professional. And now, if you don't have that, then what you can do is you can use stock images. I don't really recommend this because stock images are not authentic, in my opinion. They're more like just filler images. So a lot of times when you go to stock image site like Shutterstock or something like that, the feel you get is too many happy people. And when there's too many happy people, when the image itself is just too glossy and too perfect with perfect lighting, then it loses an aura of authenticity. So with that being said, if you have nothing else, you can go to a stock image site like Shutterstock or a free one like Unsplash. And if you can paste the link in there for folks, that'd be great. Those are sites where you can pick and choose like different stock images that you can just fill in the blank.
Nice. All right, so last resort, folks, Unsplash and Shutterstock. Sounds good. Cool. Moving on to storytelling. Now we know that a story, what is it? A picture is worth 1,000 words, but now what about all the details that go along with it? Why are emotionally resonant stories more effective in donor engagement and conversion than just giving them the statistics?
Yeah, so you say that a picture is worth 1,000 words, but a story is worth $1,000.
Nice. This is the new phrase, people.
So a great story will sell itself and will lend itself to sharing than a story that is weak. So if anyone gets anything from this time today is that actually, even if you don't have a brand, it doesn't matter. As long as it has a great story, then a brand will kind of formulate around that story naturally. So really, it's like getting your story right is the best thing you can do, because it'll just make everything easier. It'll make conversations with donors easier. It'll make writing your appeal easier. It'll make Giving Tuesday, year-end fundraising just a lot easier, because it's the story and the idea will sell itself. So maybe that's that. But what's important about stories is that it actually elicits some type of emotion, while data and facts help support kind of the approach that you're making and display your impact. But just showing data itself will not get the same response as if you have a story that really resonates and that is compelling. So because of that, stories really stick. People will remember them, and then people also share them. You're creating some type of emotion that people will remember, versus just giving them an Excel table where they can just look at. Nobody remembers what's on an Excel table, but everybody remembers the feeling that they get from watching a movie or browsing TikTok or kind of whatever it is. So not only does it provide this feeling, but also gives a proof that the organization has some type of impact. And when we look at the data, especially when we look at the data from the Causeless Giving study, that the folks that want to donate to your organization are the ones that believe that their donation is making an impact. So the more you're able to convey that through the stories and then supported by the data, then the more successful you'll be.
Interesting. So like how more practically would an organization ensure that their visual images and elements are actually conveying impact?
I think it goes to what is the narrative itself. So even before you think about images, think about what is the story just in written form that we want to tell, and what is the action that people want to take. And then what you do is you kind of break up the story to figure out, okay, do we have imagery that supports kind of like this detail about how somebody was having like a hard time? Let's kind of show that picture. And then do we want to show a contrast at the end before we make an ask to showcase how that person has been transformed? And then we have imagery related to someone that's more uplifting, for example. And then you have kind of the story narrative happens where you have kind of like this hero with like a problem, and then he became like really, really amazing. And then because of that, the donor feels inspired, and then they'll click on the donate button to make a donation. So thinking about the narrative first and then applying the visuals is an approach that folks could think about as they think about, okay, what kind of visual storytelling we want to bring into our narrative here.
Got it. So more of like visually depicting the story arc, if possible, like from beginning of the story to the result of the impact of the donation. That makes sense.
Yeah. And I think on top of that too, I think what's really interesting is taking that to digital too. So I think a lot of times, we may come up with like a great narrative and great images we want to do, but then like a lot of fundraisers have a hard time figuring out, okay, well, I have this great narrative, I have this great imagery, but how do I actually get it online? like, how do I actually put this in a form where people can really digest? I think that's a problem with how systems are set up today, where fundraisers are not empowered with easy design tools, such as the ability to design their campaign sites and pages and lay it out in a way that really resonates. So I think what's really important too is just being able to have great tools that allow you to lay out your campaign site, your donation pages, kind of put in visual imagery and photos and quotes, and also plop in like your donation form onto the page all yourself without having to depend on an IT person. Otherwise, you won't be able to adjust and get these pages up within a reasonable amount of time. So that's one of the reasons why at Cosmox, at least, we support this idea of storytelling, where everything on our platform is do it yourself, where you can design these campaign sites and pages all yourself as a fundraiser or marketer without having to depend on an IT person or web dev.
Right. Yeah, we make it super easy just to be able to create your story on your own. And yeah, I guess Rob has a couple examples. I know we have a few more steps in the process to get through, but Rob, if you want to just share your examples and then also like explain how to use Connect steps to guide the donor through their giving journey on the form.
Yeah. So I just want to share just one, since I know I'm blabbering and going on with this. But basically, I think the Connect steps is really interesting, where there's essentially 3 steps to how you want to get your story told on your donation page. The first one is, okay, we talked about logo and stuff, but really when it comes to your form itself, it's connecting impact with gratitude. So on a donation form, what you should have is not only just amounts to give, but also a description of what that amount would really yield in terms of impact. So donors understand, okay, $100 will yield more water purifiers for clean water, for example. And they go through a process of making a donation. At the end of it, when they're making a donation, it's super easy for them to kind of go through the process without all the clunky forms, and they can make kind of just easy payments through mobile wallets or credit card, ACH, that kind of stuff. And then they immediately get a branded, customized thank you letter or email receipt at the very least. So kind of connecting the impact with gratitude, having 3 easy steps is will yield more retained donors.
Excellent. Yeah, no, this definitely makes a lot of sense. And if anybody out there needs a new donation form or anything like that, we're happy to set up a demo, as we mentioned, to help you with that. But next on our brand beacon framework, we are on to the user experience. So Rob, help us understand why a clean, intuitive navigation is so important for donor engagement and conversion.
Yeah, so as we kind of mentioned at the very early on in our webinar, that high earner donors, 81% of them, they want a seamless donation experience. But when it comes down to like, what is a seamless donation experience? Well, there's a couple of different things. The first one is having like easy navigation. So the ability for donors to navigate to your donate button, as well as to easily navigate to different parts of your campaign site, for example, to get more information, is really important. So they can navigate and find the right information they want. The other piece of it is what we just talked about, the CTAs, where you're using colors that really pop out so folks can find your donate button, as well as not giving them too many choices so they get confused on what to do next. So having great CTAs. And then the very last part when it comes to user experience is that if there is an error when someone's making a donation, that they can easily remediate the error themselves. For example, if they punch in the wrong zip code when they're making a donation, then they can easily just correct that. And as well as just little feedback mechanisms in the form itself that tell the donor that their donation went through, like a little thank you screen or a confirmation screen, and then an email receipt that comes into their inbox, which is another medium, in order for them to just get a knowledge for their donation. So providing this seamless experience is really important, since a lot of high earner donors value this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, do loading speeds play any role in donor conversion as well?
Yeah, they do. So in general, there have been a lot of studies that show that the faster your page is, the faster it loads or appears to load, then the more donors will go through with the process. So for example, Google PageSpeed, which is a ranking of different pages. So you can punch in like your corporate website, for example, your donation page. You can see how fast it loads on mobile, how fast it loads on desktop, and then you get rated in terms of how good it is, essentially from an SEO perspective. So having a fast donation page is important, especially on mobile, since the longer it takes for your page to load, then the more donations you'll lose.
Interesting. Well, yeah. So it's important to pretty much get those updated. Any tips on how to get a fast loading donation page?
Yeah, a few of them. So if you have a lot of images on your donation page, then it's going to load pretty slowly. So one of the things you can do is optimize the image size. So making sure it's not like 5 MB per image, for example, or something in 100 KB. The other thing you can do is you can use more like modern image types. For example, like WebP is something that is very fast loading, as well as small size as well. So you can use that. And we have some resources on that. Other things too is you can use a CDN, which is a content delivery network. So if you have a lot of content on your campaign site or your donation page, then you can use a CDN on the back end. And then what that'll do is essentially that'll make sure that there's a whole bunch of servers all around. So no matter where your donor is, that the data or the image, for example, can get to them as fast as possible. So for example, if you have a donor in the East Coast, it's going to take a long time if your donation page servers are, for example, in Europe. Well, what happens is that a content delivery network will make sure that your server is closer to where your audience is, so it serves the pages a lot quicker, which increases the speed. So those are just two examples.
Gotcha. How about the mobile payment integration options for mobile? Would you like to move on to the
Yeah,
mobile part of our framework?
sure. Yeah, that's a good lead in into the next piece of it, especially since we're kind of running short on time. But with the mobile stuff, with mobile payments, it also helps increase or helps reduce the amount of time it takes donors to go through the donation process. So instead of somebody having to find a credit card and put it in, they could just use Apple Pay, Google Pay, Venmo, or PayPal in order to complete a transaction. And when we did our Cosmos Giving study a few months ago, mobile wallets was the number two preferred way to pay for donations from donors. So the first was just credit card, debit card, and the second was mobile wallets, and then third was cash and check. So if you're not optimizing for mobile wallets, then that's pretty much not optimizing for. It's very similar to not optimizing for credit card and debit cards.
Mm-hmm. Right. And it's so important to give a wider range of payment options, especially for the higher earners and for recurring donors. Yeah, so with the mobile wallets, it'll definitely help to streamline the donation experience, which 81% of high earners have said that they enjoy on a donation page, a more streamlined experience. Yeah, did you want to go into any types of examples about how mobile payment integration works? I think we already saw that on our CauseVox donation form, but they pretty much just automatically display, right? It's not like the donor has to do anything special. It's just automatic on the form.
Yeah, it's typically just automatic on a form. If you're using CosBox, it's automatic. I'm not really sure if you have your own donation form. If outside of CosBox, if it has the ability to do it. If it does, then typically it is automatic as well. But for us at CosBox, at least, if the donor wants to pay their PayPal, Venmo, Apple Pay, Google Pay, for example, then they can easily just do that. It's directly integrated.
Awesome.
I think one thing that's pretty cool too, just on mobile, just to wrap up on the mobile section is one of the things you can do is you can take a look at your donation page that you have already or your campaign site, and you can see what it looks like on your mobile phones. Of course, you can just go to it on your phone and kind of test around. But if you're using Google Chrome, one of the little nifty things I like to do is use the developer tools. So if you go to View, Developer, Developer Tools, this is just on Google Chrome, then you can actually select and kind of view to see what it looks like on a mobile phone. So
Oh, that is actually amazing. I did not even know that myself. So
yeah.
fantastic. Everyone's learning here today. That's cool. Great. So we know about design and mobile user experience in mobile. Now we're on to the final test section. So you mentioned that demographic insights are a key factor, but what are some examples of how organizations can really effectively use that data to create a more personalized and effective donation page? This is part of the segmenting step of the testing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely segmenting matters. One of the things I alluded to earlier is that a lot of folks treat their donation page as a one size fits all. Not only one size fits all for the different demographics and different demographics that they have from a donor base, but the different kind of history of donors, like someone who's a first time donor versus like a returning donor. They just have a one size fits all. And then on top of that, too, is a lot of folks just see their donation page as a one size fits all in terms of the season, too. So they use the same donation page for a spring fundraising appeal as for a Giving Tuesday year-end campaign, which I think does a huge disservice to how you do fundraising. So one of the things that I think is really important is if you have the ability to segment to figure out, okay, who are the donors I'm targeting or what is the fundraising I'm doing, then having different donation pages or having a separate campaign site for it would be really valuable. So you can track to see how successful that campaign or appeal is, as well as then you can easily tweak the donation levels that you display, or you display the type of donations you want people to give. So for example, tailoring your donation page to only have one-time gifts would be really great for just to acquire donors for the first time, just to get them through the door so you can nurture them. But then presenting kind of recurring donations or pledge donations to your donors who you want to upgrade, who've been donating for the past 3 or 5 years, so you can retain them, would be a great idea as a separate donation form. So segmenting is really important when it comes to how you use it.
Right. It seems like it's important to be pretty specific with different groups of donors and to yield the best results and also be adaptive to their needs. So that's segmenting. In terms of feedback, should an organization collect donor feedback, and what is most beneficial to learn from donors?
Yes, so feedback from donors is always important. Typically, you see this in like a donor survey. So a survey that's sent out to donors to kind of get an idea of like who they are, what they're interested in, or kind of how their donation process is. So I think all of that is really important. If there are like troublesome points in the donation process, then you can work to remediate that to make the experience a lot easier for folks. But then also that data can be used to profile your donors. So if you get a better idea of your donors are interested in certain pieces or certain campaigns, then those are the folks that you can target for other appeals that are more specific and personalized to those interests.
Mm-hmm. Sure, that makes a lot of sense. Great. So we've segmented the donors, we've heard their feedback and gotten some insights. And then what should an organization do with those insights now? Would they be updating the form or just leave this form as is? How do they implement the feedback?
Yeah. If it's around making the donation experience easier, then yes, updating the form as fast as possible would be great. So if, for example, if a donor says, "Hey, like, I really want to pay through," or if they say the time it takes to make a donation just takes too long, it was really hard to do that. So what you can do is you can take a look at how fast your pages are loading, or you can take a look at maybe you're collecting too much data. You're collecting like their address and their phone number and their email address, and you're asking them 20 different questions, so it takes 10 minutes to make a transaction. Then maybe kind of cutting down on the fields you collect would be important. Or maybe your donors are just really confused in terms of what their donation is going to because they're not really sure. Then maybe using like donation tiers with descriptions will be really important so that it conveys a sense of trust as well as a sense of how the donor can make an impact. So iterating on the form as well as making sure that your form and page and campaign site is easy to iterate on is really important.
Gotcha. Yeah. And how about in terms of just being relevant in terms of like the technology that we use? Is it okay to, use what an organization has used for many years, or when how do they know when to update the form and what to do with updating their forms?
Yeah, I think this comes in two parts. The first is what are donors saying, right? Are donors having trouble? Like after you have an honest discussion with a sample of donors or through surveys, like if donors are asking for more ways to pay, or if they're having a hard time making a donation, or if your donation page just doesn't look too brand. Like for example, if your donation page is clunky or doesn't look professional, but then you're trying to convey a sense of professionalism, of trust in your brand, then that would be a time to to kind of fix it or find an alternative in order to support your brand and your story.
Yeah, that sounds good. So just always being responsive, right, and adaptable to your donor preferences is super important these days. Yeah. Well, thank you, Rob, for taking the time today to share with us all of your nuggets of wisdom on the brand beacon framework. This has been amazing. I know it's 4:31 now here Eastern time, so want to be careful of our time. But if any of the people, any of our attenders here, attendees had any additional questions, you can feel free to email us at support@causevox.com. And I don't know, Rob, if you had any last opinions, ideas, anything you wanted to share.
Last words. Yeah. Brand beacon framework, great kind of process to follow, not only individually as a fundraiser, but also as a team with your marketing people, your IT people, as well as your executive director. So I encourage you all to kind of take a look at the slides when you have a chance and kind of watch this as a team. The other piece of it too is if you're looking for help, if you're not happy with your tools that you have, you can always take a look at CauseVox. We have a new intuitive site and page designer that allows you to build custom donation pages, as many as you want to for different segments, as well as to build campaign sites that really put your brand first, where you can have your own personality, you can have your own formats, your own structures, all this without having to depend on an IT person, a web developer, or designer. You can just do it yourself. So take a look. Feel free, if you want to learn more about CauseVox, you can always go to causevox.com. And I encourage you all to schedule a demo or have a conversation with somebody from our team. So again, I think Jenna, you mentioned that these slides would be sent out in the next day or two, as well as a recording will be sent out. So I just want to thank everybody, since we're over on time, thank you for your attention, and hopefully this was helpful.
Yes. Thank you all again. We'll hope to talk to you soon. Take care now. See you at the next webinar. Bye.